Hello, hello. Hello to those on Zoom and hello to those that will be joining me on Instagram. Just going to wait a couple moments for people to jump in. Hey Joe, on Zoom. So as you know, as always, I'll be looking back and forth between the two screens. So I might be talking to you, or I might be talking to you, and I will keep an eye on the comments boxes if you have any questions as we move through it. As always, this will be uploaded straight after. So if you don't get a chance to ask a question or you want to wait till afterwards, you can always watch it back and drop me a message then if needed. So today's deep dive is, oh, hi, Lindsay. Hi. What else we got? We've got Jan. Hello. My thing keeps freezing though. But ironically, we're going into boundaries, and I have my dog here who is awful with respecting boundaries. So that's quite ironic. But he is here with me. Oh, hi Tash, as well. So we're going to jump in. Like I said, I'll be looking back and forth between the two screens as we go through boundaries. Like I said, my dog is probably not going to respect mine and be quiet, but hey ho, it's all part of life. So what are we covering today? So a few things. We're going to be covering what are boundaries. Some of you maybe have a great understanding of boundaries, maybe some of you not so much. We're going to go into why they are important. We're going to go into what happens if boundaries aren't maintained. So if we don't set them, if they're not maintained, what can that lead to? What can happen within us if we don't set them, and when we set them, so how that can change our own inner perspective of ourselves. Quiet doggos. We're going to look at how to set boundaries with ourselves, which for me I think is the most important and hardest, with other people, but also I got asked a lot about how do I set boundaries with my boss or people at work. So we're going to go into that as well. So let me chuck the dogs out. Out. Okay. Go. And you don't have to listen to them whining. So a definition of boundaries, this is not my own definition, this is one I just thought, so I look on Google, see what Google says. And it's the act of setting boundaries is a life skill that has been popularized by self-help authors. And it is the practice of open communicating and asserting your personal values as a way to preserve and protect against them being compromised or violated. My own kind of definition of it would be something along the lines of a boundary is a guideline or a rule or a limit that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and kind of permissible ways for other people to behave towards them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. So what I want to start by asking you, I want you to ask yourself these questions is, one, do you always put yourself last? So just ask yourself that. Hi, Jenna. So do you always put yourself last? Ask yourself that, am I always putting other people before my own needs? And also ask yourself, do I repeatedly put myself in uncomfortable situations that I don't want to be in? Ask yourself that. Are you always in these positions? And of course, I always talk about it's good to get outside of your comfort zone and to challenge yourself in some way. But are you putting yourself in uncomfortable situations that are maybe not going to lead to your own growth? So then, they're not in that kind of umbrella of, getting out of your comfort zone, find growth, self-development. Are you putting yourself in positions that are super uncomfortable and you don't need to be in them for any reason? And ask yourself, if you're always doing this, if you're always putting your other people first and you're putting your needs last, what are you actually benefiting from that long term? Because what we'll go into today is a lot of us put others' needs before our own because we're too, we're not comfortable with saying, actually, no, one, we're not good at saying no, or we're not good at voicing what we need. And by not withholding my boundaries, what am I telling my future self? Ask yourself that. So if you're holding yourself back, what does that mean for your future self? Are you serving your future self at all? No. So we're going to go into that into a bit more detail, but just have those kind of questions in your head. And when we go through these boundaries, of course, thinking about yourself and how maybe others have maybe violated your boundaries, but I want you to also check yourself with all of these deep dives, a lot of it. We can be, so-and-so broke that boundary and so-and-so did this to me and so-and-so has done that to me. But ask yourself, am I pushing other people's boundaries? Because a lot of the time we have to hold ourselves accountable as well. So I want you to have that kind of in your mind, be like, yeah, someone did that to me, but actually I've probably broken that person's boundary, or I push that boundary too often. Usually with those that we really care about, we push the boundaries, like your partners, your friends, or your family. But can be with other people as well. You know, if you're a boss of people, maybe you sometimes push things too much with your employees. So it's always something to look at. So again, asking yourself today and understanding when it resonates with you and when you've had your boundaries violated, but ask yourself, okay, do I violate others' boundaries? So again, check yourself. It's all part of growth, you know, self-growth. So I'm just going to touch on, I say briefly, but I know I'll take ages going through this. We're going to go through kind of types of boundaries. So physical, emotional, time boundaries, sexual boundaries, materialistic boundaries, and also intellectual boundaries. I'm just going to kind of brush through these. If you have any questions along the way, just type them in. But physical boundaries is kind of your need for personal space. It's like being comfortable with being touched, and your physical needs, like needing to rest, to eat, to hydrate, to move. So a healthy physical boundary might sound like, you know, I'm really tired, so I can't come to that today, or, you know, I'm not really big on hugging, so I was to hug you, let's just fist bump, you know, or shake hands instead. Could be something, one I experienced myself with my sister growing up, is don't go in my room without asking first. So they seem really simple and seem really obvious, but you'd be surprised at how people are not good at this. You know, I used to be really uncomfortable with hugging growing up. I don't know why. I love a hug now. And I would voice that because I didn't want to offend the other person, which is silly. So I would kind of betray myself just to keep the other person happy. Even if I said to them, do you know what, I'm not comfortable with hugging, let's fist bump instead. They might be like, yeah, cool, that's fine. So physical boundary violations could be something like receiving inappropriate or unwanted touch by a stranger in a nightclub. We've all been through that, I'm sure. Being denied your own physical needs. Or having someone come into your personal space in a way that is uncomfortable for you. And this can range from mild to severe in regards to violations. And, you know, the most serious would be physical abuse and neglect, which we're not going to go into today. We're kind of just going on a little bit more lighthearted stuff. Then we've got emotional boundaries, which is all about repeating and respecting one's energy, feelings, and setting emotional boundaries means recognizing how much emotional energy we are capable of giving and taking in as well. So respecting emotional boundaries means validating the feelings of others and making sure you respect their ability to take in emotional information. So, for example, you could share, we've kind of touched on this in regards to toxic positivity, but you could share something with somebody, a friend, saying, you know, you're really struggling, and maybe they just shut you down. So in some way they brush it off, or they don't actually listen to you. And, you know, a way of voicing that your boundary is kind of being ignored or violated could be, you know, when I share my feelings with you and you shut me down, it makes me feel really upset and frustrated. I can only share my inner world with you if you were able to respond respectfully for me. That's where you can voice this. And if anybody wants any of the templates, let me know and I will send them over to you. Another thing I want to touch on with emotional boundaries is sometimes you might be on the receiving end of someone venting to you or getting things off their chest, and you're just not in the mind space for it. You've got your own shit going on. By the way, apologies, I will probably swear a lot today. So if that is the case for you, say one of you came to me now and was like, Matty, you know, blah, 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 you just start writing off. I'd be like, hey, I'm so sorry you're having a tough time. Right now, though, I'm not in a place to take in all of this information and to give you the kind of you know, the shoulder to lean on that you need. Do you have anyone else to talk to, or can we discuss this maybe tomorrow when I feel like I have a little bit more space around my energy? That's a nice way to voice it. You know, I shouldn't offend someone by saying that. I'd like to think they'd understand that, you know, I'm not in a good place and it benefits us both. If we don't have this interaction right now, we'd have it another time. Again, another way, if you're someone that, you know, sometimes just needs to vent, you know, I am so guilty of this. When I vent, I just like, I kind of word vomit it out at whoever I see first sometimes. But what I try and do now is when I need to vent, I'm like, hey, I'm having a really tough time today and I need to vent. Are you in a place to listen to me? Are you capable of listening to me right now? One, to give me the kind of space and energy I need from you, but also I don't want to, you know, put everything on you if you're not in that space to do so. So that's just something to, you know, keep in the back of your mind, because I think we all do this, especially with those we care about. We just come home from work and we're like, blah, 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 blah. This shit happened today and that shit happened today. And sometimes we need to, you know, respect that these people might not be in the headspace to deal with us and that energy right now. So thinking about how we could violate others here is dismissing and critiquing people's feelings or having our own critiqued. Asking people to justify their feelings is a violation of an emotional boundary. No one should have to justify why they feel a certain way. If I tell you, hey, Jenna, I'm feeling really freaking angry at you for something, and you know why, I don't have to justify, well, you made me angry because of this, this, and this. You know, if you know why, that's what I'm trying to get into. Also telling other people how they should feel. Again, that comes a bit in with toxic positivity. So just be happy. You should just be grateful. You shouldn't tell anyone else how they should feel about a situation. It's up to them to process it and go through. Again, what I've just touched on, emotionally dumping your crap on somebody without their permission is violating an emotional boundary. Or sharing inappropriate emotional information with your children, something I've experienced. My parents, when they argued, they kind of tell me and my sister about it, stuff we didn't or shouldn't have been told, basically. Another one, which is very common, especially in relationships where there's an element of distrust or lack of self-esteem, would be reading or going through others' personal information without their consent. So checking your partner's phone. For example, like I said, without their consent. If they're like, hey, look at my phone, I mean, there's probably still a trust issue there, but at least they're consenting to it and giving you that permission to go into that line. So a time boundary is, your time is valuable. We all have limited hours in the day. We have 24, and it's important to protect it and how we use that energy. If you're someone who hasn't got much going on in their life and you've got a lot of free time, great. If you don't, if you're like myself, you've got work, you've got your dogs, you've got university, you've got business, you've got loads of things going on. You have to be really protective of your time, and setting time boundaries is incredibly important at work, home, and socially as well. Getting that balance, you need all three, unless you don't work. But you need to get that balance between homework and your social life. And setting time boundaries means understanding your priorities and setting aside enough time for the many areas of your life without overcommitting, something I'm very good at doing. So when you understand your priorities and get clarity around them, it's much easier to limit the amount of time you are giving to other people. So it could be you voicing this kind of boundaries, like, hey, I can't come to that event this weekend, or I can only stay for an hour. And again, just so I want to reiterate, you don't have to over explain yourself here. Someone's like, oh, why can't you come? I just can't, I've got stuff on. Could be if you're asking someone for their time, do you have time to meet today? And if they're like, yeah, I do, great. If they don't, they don't. Setting another boundary, he'll be like, hey, I would love to help you, but I would be overcommitting myself and I would be stretching myself too thin. Is there another time we can do this? Another one could be, we have a date night on Sunday, so we can't make it. If someone invites you to an event on a Sunday, for example. And another one which is really important I want to touch on is those in business who have a skill or do something and they're forever being pulled to help with this, that, and that in regards to kind of how they earn money. So I get this a lot where people are always trying to, hi, Kaylee, I'm in your bedroom, by the way. So it could be setting a boundary like, hey, I'm happy to help you with that, but my hourly rate is, so often, especially with friends, people will, can I have this off you, and expect it because they're your friend, but you're like, well, this is actually my job. So yeah, you can have this and I'm happy to help you with that, but my hourly rate is. So don't be afraid to voice that, by the way. Now going into the last three, I'll speed it up a little bit, but sexual boundaries, this is kind of obvious, I would like to think, but healthy sexual boundaries include consent, of course, agreement and respect, communication and understanding of preferences and desires, and of course privacy as well. So healthy sexual boundaries look like, asking for consent, of course, okay, otherwise it's rape and abuse. Discussing and asking the other person what pleases them, or telling them what pleases yourself, requesting a condom or discussing contraception, saying no, and protecting the privacy of the person that you are intimate with. Again, very important. And way of voicing this boundary and checking with the other person is, is this okay for you? Can you tell me what you like, don't like? Do you even want to have sex or be intimate right now? And on the other receiving end, like, hey, I don't want to have sex tonight. Can we cuddle instead, with your partner? Or I am really into whatever it might be, feet. not that is not my personal thing, but I'm into feet or touching feet. Is that something you'll be comfortable with? Voicing your boundaries and communicating what you like and don't like is paramount. Again, it's all comes down to communication. So I think we all know the violations of a sexual boundary, sulking or punishing or getting angry if someone doesn't want to have sex with you, not asking for consent, pressure to engage in unwanted sexual acts. So maybe it's a kink you like, the other person doesn't. That's not okay to push that on them. Unwanted sexual comments, and also lying about contraceptive use, or your health history as well. So they're all violations of those boundaries. Now, intellectual boundaries. Now, this refers to your thoughts and other people's thoughts, ideas and curiosities. And healthy intellectual boundaries include respect for the ideas of the people. But they can be violated when your thoughts and your curiosity is shut down, dismissed or belittled. And respectfulness and willingness to kind of dialogue and understand are really important here. So healthy intellectual boundaries also mean considering whether or not it's a good time to talk about something in that instant. So for example, kind of voicing this boundary if it's being violated would be like, hey, I know we disagree on this, but I will not let you I will not let you belittle me like that. Or, hey, I would love to talk about this more, but I don't think talking about this during, I don't know, Christmas dinner is the best time. I can respect that we have different opinions here. Could be another one. And lastly, another example could be when we talk about this, we don't get very far. I think it's a good idea to avoid the conversation right now and come back to it when we're both kind of a little bit in a better space. And then material, this is the last one, material boundaries can refer to items or possessions, like your home, your car, bike, clothing, jewelry, even money. And it is healthy you understand what you can and cannot share, and how you expect your items and your materialistic things to be treated by the people who you share them with. So having limits on how your material items are treated is healthy and prevents resentment overall. So it could be something like someone always asks to use your car and be like, hey, I can't lend out my car to you. I am the only one on the insurance. Or no, I cannot lend you money. I'm sorry. I would be happy to help you in another way. Can I make you some meals? If you are struggling with money, can I take a bit of burden off by making you, I don't know, cottage pie? Or yes, you can borrow that, but I need it back by Friday. And I want it back the way you took it, I don't want anything wrong with it. Setting those boundaries, people might think, because you could borrow your favorite dress to somebody and not say like, hey, yeah, but I need it back before, and then you don't see it again, or I need it back as you took it, and if you don't, you need to replace it. And if you don't put that boundary in place before, they're like, oh, well, sorry, it was an accident. And it can be about kind of blurry and grey area. So materialistic boundaries are violated when something is taken without your consent, or damaged or borrowed too frequently. And this is a really big one. Another material violation is using materials or possessions to manipulate and control relationships. You see this a lot in abuse, like an emotional abuse within a relationship, where maybe one partner is the breadwinner and uses that to keep the other person kind of controlled. But again, I'm not going to delve too much into that. If it is something you're struggling with, please do reach out though. So let's go into the more nitty-gritty. That's kind of the boring stuff I've kind of gone over, just highlighting some kind of key aspects of boundaries. But I get asked a lot, so how do I know where my boundaries lie? How do I know if someone's crossed my boundary? Well, you'll know because it doesn't feel right to you. When someone does something to you and you feel uncomfortable with it, it makes you feel stressed or unhappy, then your boundary is being pushed. Okay, so it's a trigger. So look for any triggers you get in your life and note them. Be aware, be self-aware of, okay, why am I feeling uncomfortable right now? Maybe someone's just said something about you, like, I don't know, oh, your hair looks different. It's not your usual style. And that's someone commenting on the way you look. And it might seem like they're not saying it in a mean way, but in another way, it's kind of a bit like passive aggressive, or like a double-ended kind of comment. And you can be like, hey, I don't really appreciate you commenting on my body, even though they meant no malice by it. For example, I always talk about this. I've had, I struggled with my how I looked. I struggled with my eating. I had really, bad kind of body dysmorphia around, I thought I was fat and all this kind of stuff. And my mother would comment on my weight. Like, oh, you've lost weight, which, yay, it might be a good thing for some, and it might be like quite positive, but actually that just reminded me that, oh, well, she used to think maybe I was bigger, so now she said, oh my God, you look good, you've lost weight, that I didn't look good before. And it was like, I don't want you commenting on my weight. And some people might be really happy with being told that they've lost weight and be like, oh, thank you, like I've been working really hard. But for me, that was triggering. So the boundary I would set was like, hey, like, I don't want you to comment on my body anymore. And that's the boundary. And I have been often like, well, why? Like, why can't I? Like, because I'm not comfortable with it. Like, you can be cut through. Look, I'm just not comfortable with it. I would really appreciate it if you didn't comment on my body and how it looked. Thank you. That's all you have to say. You don't even have to explain yourself. I have in the past, but you don't have to. Now, I want to go into something really important, is if you don't set boundaries, so if you don't set your own boundaries with other people or with yourself, what happens to you internally? And basically, when you don't set boundaries and you don't respect your own boundaries, you basically break the bubble of self-love and self-respect that we all need to have. You tell yourself, I am not as important as that person, or I'm not as important as X, Y, and Z. You tell yourself all the time that I respect that person more than I respect myself. So that is what happens when you don't respect your own boundaries. You know, it could be that you always make time for that person that drains your energy, you know, you love them, you want them in your life, but you maybe overcommit your time to them. So when you're always spending time with them and you're not giving that energy back to yourself, you're basically saying, I respect that friend who always drains my energy more than I respect myself. Or I respect the opinion of my family who tell me I should be doing that instead of what I want to do with my career. So I'm giving them more time. So I respect them more than I do myself. And I've seen this before, not personally, because I am straight, but it could be like your family are, you know, a bit homophobic, or not homophobic. They're like, oh, I love gay people, but I just don't want you to be gay. Or they're like, I don't want my children to be gay. And it could be like, okay, well, if I was gay, I don't want to come out as anything other than straight because I don't want to upset my family. And that's just you saying that, well, I respect my family's own needs before my own, which is not okay. So what I want to reiterate here is your biggest responsibility is yourself, you. And excuse my French, but fuck everybody else, okay? If others are dictating how you should be or feel or act or present yourself, then fuck them. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. You do not owe them anything, not even your parents. You know, we're all saying, like, everyone's like, oh, you should respect your elders, you should respect your parents. Yes, you should respect people, of course you should, but that respect should be mirrored back to you. And if people are telling you how to live your life, how you should feel, they're not respecting you. So why the fuck are you respecting them? So I want to just get that out there. Your only responsibility is yourself, okay? And now going into people that push your boundaries. Now, these people, I used to be one of these people. The people that don't respect your boundaries are people that haven't set their own boundaries or haven't been modeled boundaries themselves. So when they find an opportunity to get something that they want, they will try and take it. And not because essentially they're bad people, because they just aren't aware. They haven't got that awareness around boundaries. So if people are breaking your boundaries, more than likely they haven't got their own boundaries and they have no awareness around that, okay? Doesn't make them bad people. It can be that they are just manipulating you in some way or trying to push to see how far they can get. But just have that in your mind. And the reason I mention that is because, again, look at yourself. I was really bad at respecting people's boundaries, not because I'm an arsehole, but I didn't have my own boundaries. There wasn't many boundaries set within my house growing up as a child. So boundaries were broken all the time. So for me, it was normal. I didn't know what a boundary was until a few years ago. I'll be honest. I didn't know people had these boundaries. So when someone told me that, no, you can't do that, Maddie, I'd get really offended because I'd be like, well, why are they saying no? Like, because it wasn't like an issue for me. You know, if you want to come in my room and go through my stuff, go through it. So I would expect, like, not this is an example I've actually done, but can I go in your room and go through your stuff and just have a little nose? It's not okay. But some people would not be comfortable with that. Whereas I would be, because I was like, well, anything goes, I'd go with the flow. I was very laid back. Essentially, I was a people pleaser. And I want to go into that in a moment. Before I do, I want to also go into people who break boundaries, and often people that have been manipulated by guilt in the past as well. Not always, but sometimes. So for example, maybe your mother or father, I don't know, put a lot into your education. Maybe they put you through private school and they were hoping for you to go to university to do, I don't know, to be a doctor. Let's say they have these high expectations of you. And when you're like, you put a little bit of push and shove, like, you know, actually, I'm not sure if I want to go to university. I'm not even sure, or if I do want to go to university, maybe I want to study art, something completely different to what they expected. And they guilt you. They're like, well, we've sacrificed so much for you. We've put you through private school, all these extracurricular activities, and you feel like you're obliged to do it. So you go down that path they wanted for you because they didn't respect your own needs. So you just went with the flow. And then you grow up to be an adult, you're this doctor, and you expect the same of your children. You expect them to go down the path that you expect for them. So you're guilt tripped into doing whatever you do, and then you guilt trip them. Again, it doesn't mean you're a horrible person. It's just like a currency you kind of adopt in your life, and it becomes like normal behavior. So that's something, again, to check yourself. Be like, okay, what was I modeled? And am I modeling that for the others that I now interact with? And the more that you act, or we act, to please others, you are telling yourself, I will only be liked if I put others' needs before my own. You essentially lose your sense of self, and you miss an opportunity to get to know yourself. It's fucked. It's literally fucked. So of course, I'm not saying be an arsehole to everyone, be there for other people. And if you can be there for them, do. If you can't, for whatever reason, just voice that. Be like, hey, I'm not in that space to do that for you, or to be that person for you, or to listen to that right now. You need to put yourself first. And this is not about being selfish. Well, it is, but it's just having that self-respect for yourself. And if doing that for somebody else, whatever that doing might be, is going to put you out, is it really okay to do? There's going to be obviously aspects where something tragic happens to someone close to you, and maybe you haven't, I'm looking after my friend's dog right now. They've got their stuff going on, and she's not that much of a problem at all, but she could have caused a nightmare. And like, that's different. I've said yes, because even though I might not have the time to look after an extra dog, it's temporary and I have got that space. But if it was too much for me, I'd be like, hey, having these dogs, 3 dogs in my house is just too much. I'm going to have to give you back. And I'd have to put myself first there. Thankfully, she's great and I love having her here. But, if it wasn't the case and it was a struggle, I'd have to be like, hey, take her back. So let's go into why. I know it's kind of already gone over this, but why are boundaries important? And without boundaries, we can feel used, we can feel depleted of energy, we can feel taken advantage of. And we can also feel intruded upon as well. So this can be in our personal relationships, this can be at work, even with strangers. And poor boundaries, or a lack of boundaries altogether, can lead to resentment, anger, frustration, exhaustion, and burnout as well. But like I said, they're basically guidelines for you and others to create and establish how to behave and interact with one another. Like you get instructions when you buy something, maybe electronic, and you're setting it up and it's instructions. Boundaries are like instructions of how to interact with me. So if I relay my boundaries to you, I'm just telling you, this is how you interact with me in a great manner. And your ways might be different, and we can maybe come to some kind of understanding there. Understand what will and won't work in our friendship, relationship, etc., etc. And setting boundaries can ensure that relationships can be mutually respectful, appropriate, and caring. So what happens when you set boundaries? So when you set boundaries, you are owning your own time. You are knowing your own worth. And when you know your own worth, people know your own worth. They know your worth too. So only you can dictate your worth. And if you don't value yourself, others won't. I mean, those closest to you will, they'll still see your worth, your closest, nearest, and dearest, but others will not know your worth unless you put it out there, okay? You dictate you, okay? And when you put your boundaries out there, when you set your boundaries and withhold them and respect them, people will stop taking advantage of you. People don't fuck with people who have strong and clear boundaries. They just don't. I'm sure right now you can think of someone, many people. They could be someone you know, or just someone, an acquaintance, maybe someone you've just seen online, okay? Someone you can think of who has freaking strong backbone, okay? They know what they want, they know their worth. And you're just like, yeah, I wouldn't fuck with them. Like, I wouldn't try and fuck with their boundaries, because they'd pull me up on them, because they know what they're worth. They know their energy, okay? And these are bold people. They're confident people. And they're doing things on their own terms. And it's a really sexy trait to have, I think. It's something I aspire to be. I aspire to be this really strong person. I do have good boundaries now, but sometimes I break my own boundaries. So I'm trying to get there with myself. And another thing when you set boundaries is you get more privacy, because nobody's going to push you to give more of yourself or to disclose more of yourself when they know you have these boundaries. No one's going to pry, because they know you'll be like, fuck you, you're taking it too far. They will pull you up on it. So you're like, I ain't going to do that, because I don't want that. I don't want to be pulled up. And the best thing about setting boundaries is you become so connected with your authentic self, and you start to know what you want, what you need, and you align with your instincts and your intuition, then you become so fucking badass and you start to trust yourself more. Okay, I want you to think of it this way. When you're people pleasing, or you're giving your energy away to things that steal energy or happiness from you, you're essentially putting your trust there and being like, well, even though I don't want to do that, at least I'm keeping the peace. And in doing so, you lose your sense of self, you lose the ability to trust yourself. And because you think your worth is tied up in other people's opinions of you, it's fucked. Like, you're saying, okay, well, only if they like me, then am I worth something, rather than you being like, well, actually, this is what I want. This is my worth. Like, this is what I expect. You're essentially allowing other people to dictate your life, your happiness, your emotions, and your path if you don't put your boundaries in place and withhold them as well. So what to do now if your boundaries are disrespected or crossed or violated? Well, firstly, again, it all comes down to communication, but firstly, you need to see if that person was even aware of that boundary, because maybe they're a stranger and they've said something to you and they don't know you. So you could be like, hey, that is not okay. Like, I don't appreciate that. Like, don't speak to me that way. We just put that boundary there. And if not, communicate that boundary. But if it's someone that is repeatedly overstepping the mark, this is where problems can arise. I'm going to go into that in a second. But what I want to just reiterate is be clear that they've overstepped the mark, let them know it's not okay to treat you that way, and avoid using words like, well, maybe if you said it this way, or I'm not sure, but it makes me feel like this, but I'm not sure why. And this is showing them that not even you are 110% on your boundary you were trying to withhold. So be clear and concise with what you say. Now, how do we set boundaries? This is the stuff that changes your freaking life. So first, this is the most important, I think. Some people will say setting boundaries with other people is most important. I believe setting boundaries with yourself is the most important, because that's where you start to learn. And why? Because when you're clear on your wants and your needs and your own boundaries, you are confident in relaying them to other people then and the outside world. Because when we maintain boundaries with ourselves, we build self-trust, self-confidence, and we become our own kind of best friend. You become your own cheerleader, your own support system. Because if you can't do that for yourself, how do you expect others to do that for you? So for me, one of my most important boundaries to withhold is my time. So I set boundaries around my time really often to limit overwhelm and burnout, because I have so many plates spinning. I run the Mental Toolbox, Get Bent Yoga. I doing a psychology degree. I teach yoga as well full time. I've got a lot going on. So I have to be really selective with my time. And trying to fit in normal stuff, like I've got to walk my dogs every day and seeing my friends. So I like to think of my kind of boundaries as having non-negotiables that I have daily, weekly, and monthly. So my daily kind of non-negotiable is, first thing, looking after my physical needs. And that is having a glass of water upon waking. It's moving my body every day in some way. It's having my morning ritual, which a few of you have done a course with me on. There's another extended version of that coming soon, so keep your eyes peeled. Weekly, my kind of non-negotiables are making sure I get my uni work done. Weekly planning, checking in with my goals, checking in with my one-to-one clients and their goals as well. And then monthly, I have non-negotiables where I make sure I get a self-care afternoon. I know it's only once a month, doesn't sound like a lot, but once a month is like my happy one afternoon. I had it yesterday and I just do whatever the heck I want, no uni, no shit, just do whatever I want. It's cleaning out any clutter, and it's revisiting my needs and be like, okay, well, what do I need next month? So I have these non-negotiables. So when you want to set boundaries with yourself, it's getting clear on what you want your life to look like. What do you want for your future self? Because what you do today, what you do now is going to influence your future self. What you don't do today, what you don't do now is also going to influence your future self. So for example, say you just spent this morning 45 minutes just like scrolling on Instagram, aimlessly scrolling, not productive at all. Ask yourself, when you're doing these things, how is that serving my future self? Okay, maybe you've just done something for the last half an hour, something this morning for half an hour, and you're like, what the fuck was the point of that? Like, that was boring, and ask yourself, how is that seeing my future self? So for example, I read about 4 hours yesterday morning of uni work, and I was like, fuck, this is boring, like, this is shit. But I was thinking, but okay, it's boring in this moment now, it's pretty shit right now. but my future self is going to get a degree out of this. So it's worth it. Whereas looking on Instagram for 40 minutes might be fun. I'm like, oh, look at Instagram. But if in a year's time, that's not benefiting me at all. Even tomorrow, that's not benefiting me in any way. Okay. So ask yourself when you're doing things, what is your future self gaining from that? And if nothing, then it's probably a boundary. You can be like, okay, I'm only going to spend 10 minutes on Instagram because no, I'm still not benefiting my future self really from that. But it's something I enjoy to do. Okay. So setting boundaries around your time there. Like I said, you're wasting your own time. So I'm not going to go too much into that. That's a time boundary, but I want you to go through these 6 pillars of time, intellect, sexual boundaries, materialistic boundaries, emotional boundaries. Again, I will type these up for you after, but have a look at these in your own time and think, okay, have I got boundaries around all of these areas? And if not, get freaking setting them, okay? So clarity, get clear on what you want. Ask yourself if this is going to benefit your future self and the life you want to create, and then set boundaries around the things that aren't working, okay? At the end of the day, as I've mentioned already, you are in control. You are in the driver's seat. You own your own future. However, this is a home truth. A lot of you aren't going to like this. We tend to play victim to ourselves when things don't go our way, when we don't take ownership over something. We blame our upbringing, our circumstances. We blame our bodies and our hormones. And I want to go into this again on another thing. I'm not, a lot of the time I blame my body for it not looking the way it wants, when really I wasn't treating it the way I should have been treating it. We blame our encounters. We are in the driver's seat, baby. So you've got to set these parameters for yourself. And when you set your parameters to yourself, that's when you get propelled forward. And sometimes we need a helping hand. Sometimes we need someone to keep us accountable for these boundaries. Again, people like myself and coaches are here to help you. So reach out to one if you need that. Okay, so last thing two things we're going to go through, and I will leave your go. It's another 5-10 minutes, is now setting boundaries around those around you. And also I want to brush on work. So I had a lot of questions about how do I set boundaries at work. So I want to go in when we come to boundaries with others. One of the things that gets broken a lot within relationships and friendships we have are arguments. So I want to talk about setting boundaries around how long you let a confrontation or a disagreement string out for. And one thing is important is deciding now, when you get into a disagreement with somebody, someone you love, for example, decide how much airtime you are going to give a disagreement, or decide how much airtime you're going to give to somebody who violates your boundaries. So say there's the same person, okay, you always fall out with because they tend to misinterpret what you say. Even though you've explained it, they still get really upset with you, and you explain it, yet there's no resolve, okay? You still are kind of butting heads. You're still in this kind of argument or this passive aggressiveness, and it's not getting anywhere. Like, we've all been there, right? So when this happens, it can start to eat you alive, and you're frustrated and you're like, prick, just like, listen to me. Listen to me. You're not getting what I'm saying. And then they're like, well, you're not getting what I'm saying. And it's like, but in heads. And you're frustrated because you always feel like you have to apologize just to end the disagreement and be like, okay, I'm sorry. Let's agree to disagree, kind of thing. But at the same time, that's not aligning with you. And if it doesn't align with you, don't allow it to be, okay? So I'm all for calling people out. Someone, especially people that are being wankers, call them out. But sometimes you maybe can't call them out on it because they are being an arsehole, or they just genuinely don't see it and they take offense to it because they are genuinely upset by what you said. So if this does or has happened to you, the best thing to do is set a boundary. So say you tried to resolve it in the past and it hasn't worked. And, if this person means nothing to you, someone you just don't care about, you could be like, bye, I don't want to speak to you about it again. But if you care for them, if you love them, then obviously you need to resolve it somehow. So you need to stop giving it airtime. So you need to stop making excuses for yourself. So for example, I get often asked by my mum, sorry mum, if you're watching this back, but I often get asked for, I got my tattoos, right? I haven't got many, I've got a couple of tattoos, they're quite small and stuff. But I often get asked by her, we often butt heads over this, and my sister does with her as well. Why have you got tattoos? Why have you got facial piercings? I got my nose pierced. And I could argue about it all day and be like, but I want them, and it's up to me, it's my body, my rules. And she knows that. I've said that to her many times, but she'll still say, oh, you're ruining your body. You know, you've got those marks for life. You've got these holes in your face for life. And we'll never see eye to eye over it, right? But I love her, I want her in my life. And, you know, she goes, why, you know, you'd look so much better without them, or at least you could cover them up. And I'm like, no, mate, I don't need to explain myself to these people, okay? I don't need to cover them up. It's permanent, it's there. It's a waste of my time explaining to her why they are important to me. So don't make excuses for it. Just be like, do you know what? They're mine. These are my body. I fancy them at the time. I love them. That is it. Draw the line. So when you button heads to somebody and they're just not seeing eye to eye, you don't have to explain yourself to get them to see your point. Be like, look, you don't understand where I'm coming from. That's okay. You do you. I'll do me. Let's leave it at that. Okay. It's not rude to shut people down. Okay, you could do it maybe a bit more polite than I have said and saying no prick. That's your call, how you voice that, but set that boundary with people and don't make up excuses for yourself. Be like, oh, but I just need to explain it to them. You don't. Just be like, this is it. It's not always black and white, but like, this is it for me. This is my black and white view on it. You're somewhere over here in a different shade of grey. We're not going to come together on this ever, clearly, because we keep butting heads over it. So let's just take a step back and let's continue with our lives. Me having piercings, for example, on my body does not actually affect you at all, does it? So another example is what I listened to off another podcast by Alexis Perez, and her podcast is Do You Fucking Mind? So in the title, you know she's going to swear a lot. She says the word C-U-N-T a lot. And I love that word. I know a lot of you don't. So I'm not going to repeat it. But she talks about how she always gets said, oh, well, if you swore less on your podcast, then you'd probably get more followers. And people would like you. She's like, I don't care. This is me. This is how I connect with my audience. If you don't like it, you don't have to listen. And I love that. Like, yeah, like if I said these deep dives would be 10 minutes, they're pretty much going to be 45 minutes today. I'm sorry, I have a lot of information to share with you, and the more I share, the more knowledge you have, the better. So if you don't want to sit here for 45 minutes, that's cool with me. People have said to me, if you want to do 5-10 minutes, Mad, you'll get more engagement. Cool. I can't just talk for 5 minutes on boundaries or 10 minutes on boundaries, because we're not going to cover enough. I have posts for that. These deep dives, they're deep. It's all in the name, deep dives. So want to clarify, again, check yourself for this. I'm talking about when people have an opinion of what you do with your life and yourself. It's different, okay, what I'm saying now, it's different if you're butting heads with somebody because you are doing something to directly harm somebody else. That is totally different, okay? You can't just say, fuck you then. Like, if you're directly harming somebody, you want to be respectful of that and you need to apologize. So, setting boundaries at work. Last bit. I'm going to talk about my experience. I used to be in a job, I call in sick because I was generally unwell. I was going to the doctor, and then I get called back at 11. Hey, a bit of an update, how you feeling? Still fucking shit. Can you come in later? No. But I'd be like, oh, I'll see how I feel. Maybe by after lunch I'll feel better and I'll come in. And I felt guilty. I felt like I was being guilt-tripped into coming in. Oh, we're really short-staffed. That is not okay. If you're ill and your employer or manager is ringing you or texting you like, hey, can you come in really short-staffed? When they know you're unwell, that is not okay. Be like, look, I'm unwell. Like, I'm not coming in. I will let you know when I'm better. Bye. And hang up the phone. Like, they can't fire you for that. Like, if you're generally unwell and you generally need to take some time out, whether it's physical health or mental health that you're struggling with, you got to take that time. And again, I want to come back to people saying you should respect your elders, you should respect like your authority figures above you. Yes, you should absolutely respect them. But remember, as I mentioned earlier, respect should be mutual. They're not respecting you, then there's something that needs to be, there's a conversation that needs to be had with them there, okay? And you can pull them up on that. Just because they're your boss doesn't mean you haven't got a right to stand up for yourself. They don't own you. They govern you within that role, they manage you within that role, but they do not own you, and they do not own your boundaries. So make sure you do express them to them, because maybe they're just unaware, okay? So if you are less experienced in a job, it doesn't mean you should be less respected. So if you need time off, say it. Honor your needs, and especially your health, physical and mental health. So one way you can do this, say for example, you're off illness. Like, okay, well, why are you ill? For one, it's none of their business. If you're ill, just say you're ill. It's none of their fucking business. And maybe maybe it's someone you're not comfortable discussing your problem with. Maybe it's really personal to you. So don't feel like you have to discuss that. So if your boss is breaking your boundaries, it could be like them ringing you outside of work hours or emailing you and expecting you to respond. Just ask them, do not call me at home after a certain time. When I've left work, I'm done. I don't want to hear of it. Tell people you'll only check work emails between these and these hours, that you don't want to constantly be having them coming in. Say no to projects that you are unable to take on due to a full workload. And if they're asking for overtime all the time, maybe from you, and you don't want to because, I don't know, maybe that evening you want to just say no, just say you have places to be. Even if your place to be is having a freaking bubble bath, that's okay. Don't feel guilty for it. Be like, no, I haven't got the energy to do that tonight, so no. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But what I want to leave you with, and you can watch this back and pause it and maybe write or journal on it, is I want you to write down relationships or things that you struggle to set boundaries over, and ask yourself, can I set a boundary around it? Or can I set a boundary within these boundaries, or can I not? So say there's two people maybe that come to mind now. Say I'm going to go pluck things up. Yeah, a friend and a parent that you really struggle to set boundaries with. The ones you feel like you say you can't set boundaries with these people, why do you feel like you can't set that boundary? Is it because you might feel like you might offend that person or lose that person or make them angry? If so, even more reason to set a boundary there. Okay, you have to. If you can't set a boundary there and you know these people are impossible, bye-bye. Like, that's the only way to protect your energy. Unless you're willing to allow them to continue to drain you in some way, that's your responsibility. So if you're willing to leave them in your life, despite not being able to set a boundary and they continue to drain you, that's your problem, okay? But if you want to get rid of that problem, you either set that boundary with them and make it clear and cool. And if they don't respect that, then it's bye-bye. Like, it's painful. It can be really upsetting, but it's a must. It's a needs must. So we're going to leave it there, because as always, I've kept you way longer than I have promised. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them now. I'm just going to double check the Zoom chat box. No, all good there. Just hellos. Hi. And same with Instagram. I can't see any here, but if you have any afterwards, please do let me know. Again, I think I've covered all the questions there that people message me about, but if I've missed anything, please give me a message and I will either film it and send it to you or just write something out. But I hope you all have an awesome Sunday. Next week, we've got a super cool topic on nootropics, which is all about substances. I'm going to go mainly for the natural substances that can enhance cognitive or brain function. So super cool topic, something I'm really passionate about. Again, anything brain is a bit of me. So yeah, see you all soon. Have an awesome day, and thank you for joining me on the deep dive. Bye.